When we first announced Recon, we made it very clear that this was going to be a professional event that was open to both players and owners. And people were dubious of that, and rightfully so. But over the last few years, I feel very confident in saying that the model has been proving itself out. And what we want to do with this talk is dig more deeply into the player and owner relationship, understand it more, where some of the struggles have come from, because they do exist. And we want to figure out how we can smooth some of those over and maybe make our community stronger in the process. On August 1st, 2015, Lisa and I made a huge mistake. To understand this mistake, you need a little bit of context. We were roughly 1 year into running Room Escape Artist. This whole website, this whole nascent industry had started to take over our lives. We were playing a lot of escape rooms with our friends, and we wanted to introduce our families to escape rooms. And back then, there were not a lot of good ways to figure out if a game was good or bad. You just went because there was an escape room. And so a new company opened up just like 5 minutes from my parents. And we said, well, this is great. Let's just go buy tickets for 2 games. We love these things. We've never seen an escape room that's been so bad that we wouldn't want to play 2 of them. And so off we went with my parents to play their very first escape room at Mystery Room, also known as Escape the Mystery Room, also known as All in Adventures. Their branding is confusing, and also their design quality is equally confusing. These 2 games were a train wreck. They were 2 of the most miserable experiences that Lisa and I have had in 1,100 escape rooms. And they were the introduction that my parents had to this whole medium that we loved. And honestly, we understood when they were pretty turned off by the whole idea and seemed reasonably confused by the fact that we were spending so much of our time playing these games. They could not fathom how good these things could be because what we showed them was so subpar.
The mistakes didn't stop. We brought my parents to a number of okay escape rooms. They weren't phenomenal and they didn't excite them. And we brought my aunt to a really terrible one. Our families just didn't understand what it was that we were so passionate about and what it was that we saw in these games, what it was that made us keep coming back. We don't often take you back to the old days. We don't like to say, well, in my day. But for just a minute today, we're going to be Grandma and Grandpa Escape Room and take you back to those days.
Back in the early days of escape rooms, the only real review sites that you could find were Yelp and Google and TripAdvisor. And everywhere you looked, everything was 5 stars. Everyone just loved escape rooms. And the reality is that this was because they weren't reviewing the game. First time players review the concept. The easiest way I can explain this is that it's like if you have only ever cooked meals for yourself. Every single time you eat, you have to go out to the store, buy the ingredients, come home, prep them, cook it. You finally eat, and then you have to go and clean everything up. And then one day someone takes you to this thing called a restaurant, this thing called a McDonald's. And you ask for some food, they hand it to you, you eat it, and you throw away the garbage at the end. 5 stars. Best day ever. How could anything possibly be better than that? This is what we were facing when we sought out reviews on Yelp and Google reviews and TripAdvisor. And this is something that really every single enthusiast encounters along the early days of their journey because everything on these sites is 5 stars. You don't have to pick. Like, they're all just great. Just go to anything until you realize that that's just not true. But we're going to put a pin in this and we're going to come back to this because this is important. We all abandoned these platforms for very good reason, but that's not the end of the story here.
Back in the early days, our community was tiny and we were searching for hidden gems. Whenever we traveled to any city, we had to play all the escape rooms because if we didn't, we might miss the best one. We might miss the good ones. We weren't traveling to find escape rooms. We were traveling, in our case, for friends' weddings, for work conferences, but we were always adding on escape rooms and we had to play them all. And that's how so many of us who played in the early days really racked up high play counts very quickly. We had to. It was the way to know what was great. And then we had to find others who had knowledge, and there were pockets of us. At the time, David and I really knew the New York area. There were folks like Errol and Manpans from the Room Escape Divas in Toronto who knew that area. And there were folks like Dan Egnor and Rich Bragg who knew the San Francisco Bay Area. And there were other pockets of people, a few of them, who we started to connect with, who had some knowledge to share. We started playing games with some enthusiasts we met, Amanda Harris and Drew Nelson. And I remember the day that Amanda texted me and said, "You have to go to Tickfaw, Louisiana." And I had never heard of this place. It wasn't New Orleans or Baton Rouge, but it was near ish to those cities. And she had booked everything in the region and found a hidden gem in Tickfaw. It was Rise Escape Rooms, a company that has since closed, but they had this game on an airliner that really had one of the coolest sets of the time, most impressive. And today they've sold their games to other local companies and you can still play them in the region or play new versions of them with those bones. But we would never have gone to Tickfaw if Amanda hadn't decided to play everything in the region and then share that knowledge. Back in the early days, we had to kiss a lot of toads to find our princes and princesses.
Over time, we started to notice this trend of local enthusiasts, people who knew a particular region really well. Like in the early days, Lisa and I were not room escape artists. We were the New York and New Jersey enthusiast room escape artist. And over time, we just kept finding more and more people like that. The folks who really knew Minneapolis and St. Paul, the people who really knew Dallas, the people who really knew Buffalo. Everyone just started to come together and we would give tips to one another when we were traveling to their regions. Over time, we started to see this phenomena that we started to call traveling enthusiasts, or people who were seeing more than one market. They were starting to connect dots. They were starting to see trends. They were starting to see differences in quality, in style. And all of these things started to give us a little bit of a broader perspective. And we started to realize that there were these things that we started calling local flavors. The first time we identified this was when we went to Chicago. The first oddity that we had noticed was that a lot of the games in the early days in Chicago, when we won, they gave us little packets of Smarties candies. We'd never seen that before, but we had seen it from like 3 or 4 companies in Chicago. Other examples of this, the games in Phoenix, Arizona tend to be much more difficult than the average. The games in Los Angeles tend to be a little bit more horror focused. If you go to the Netherlands, you'll find that there is a vibe that is distinctly Dutch. It doesn't exist anywhere else, near as I can tell. Similar in Athens, there is a type of horror there that is unique to that city. One of my favorite little local flavors is that we often hear little differences in rules. And the rules may be the same, but the phrasings in a particular city might be different. And I cannot remember the city that this happened in. But one time we went to a whole bunch of games in one place and we kept hearing this same rule. You can solve all puzzles with 2 feet on the floor, which is a very roundabout way of just saying no climbing. But those kinds of things are regional. Rules explanations are regional. Pricing is regional. There's a lot of things that's regional. These flavors are not universal, they are very local phenomena. When I first started telling my podcast co host PG about this, she became obsessed with this idea because she, at the time, was a Los Angeles based enthusiast. She was very much a local enthusiast there. It hadn't occurred to her that the rest of the United States didn't have quite as much horror as Los Angeles did, or that the games in LA might be a little bit more on the player friendly side when it comes to the difficulty level. These things were really surprising to her. And then she started traveling, I think in part just because she really wanted to see what these different local flavors were and confirm that they exist, and confirm she did. Local flavors lead to local expectations. What this means is that the players who are only playing in that regional bubble will reasonably assume that that's what escape rooms are like everywhere. And it's just not the case. So much of what makes an escape room is more or less universal, but the details, the nuance, that all changes regionally. And that leads to some interesting things because those local expectations are not global expectations. And that leads to, especially online, you see this all the time in the Facebook groups, you have people who have two different local perspectives arguing with one another, but they're arguing past one another because they don't realize that each one of them has a slightly different perspective based on where they're from. And so these arguments tend to be not especially productive.
And that leads to one of our least favorite statements, the statement, "That's not an escape room." The thing is, we've said that too. We were part of the problem. When we first encountered Five Wits, we were super impressed, but we didn't think it was an escape room. Five Wits has a lot of locations across the northeastern US. And at these locations, there are rooms that are beautiful sets where you go in as a group for a timed experience where you solve puzzles, you go on an adventure, and you follow a story. It's really quite similar to an escape room. But we also noticed how they have a pipeline model. They have multiple different teams in the experience at the same time in different parts of it. And because of this, the puzzles all have to reset automatically. The game master isn't coming in to do this. They were also in some places a little bit more physical than we had been used to. And we fixated on this difference. We fixated on the difference and ignored the similarity, when in truth, Five Wits is quite similar to an escape room. I mean, if you're going to label it, it's not ice skating. We can understand why this was intimidating. We were intimidated. It felt as though Disney had built a really great escape room. And if you're an owner, it's easy to say, well, that's not an escape room because it's not like what you're doing. And it's scary in that way. We get it. We were intimidated too. But it is an escape room. And when you see something that's different, you don't have to love it. Everyone doesn't have to love everything. We can each find different styles of escape rooms that we love the most. And it can be really hard when someone doesn't love the thing that you love, or someone doesn't love the thing that you made. But that's okay. And when that happens, that doesn't mean that you have to say, that's not an escape room. Because if you say that, You're freezing escape rooms in time. You're saying that escape rooms can't change and they can't evolve and still be escape rooms.
In almost every single talk that I give, I show this photo of Escape the Mysterious Room by Scrap. This was the first escape room in North America, made by the first escape room company in the world. And I never share this with any amount of condescension. This is an incredible starting place. We have moved very far past it, but it was an incredible moment, and I am so thrilled that this game existed. I'm also happy it doesn't exist anymore because we have moved past this. Escape rooms don't just have to be lock boxes and IKEA and used furniture and a mess of puzzles. There's so many more things that these games can be. Just one example is a game that we played this year and absolutely adored, Forgotten Cathedral by Escaparium in Montreal, Canada. This game is theatrical, it's bombastic, it has a lot going on, a lot of visual and sound effects, a lot of practical effects. It feels alive and magical in this game. This is a huge leap from where we were a little more than a decade ago. And this is not an isolated game. There are so many like this on the Turpica list around the world. There are so many games that are pushing on boundaries for our benefit. For frame of reference, I want to take a look at a brief history of video games. 1972, Pong emerges as the very first video game. A software developer looks at their computer and says, "This thing is pretty good at doing work, but it's kind of boring. I want it to be fun." And so he makes a game where you can beat a ball back and forth, basically making tennis. This is a very humble starting place for something that has grown so big. A little more than a decade later, this is what video games looked like. There were a lot more colors. There was a lot more action and energy. There was something resembling a plot. These things had come a very long way. Escape rooms have come a longer way in roughly the same amount of time. And then if you flash forward now 51 years since Pong emerged, this is what video games look like. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. This game is majestic and beautiful and offers so much gameplay and so much intrigue. And the crazy part about this is that this isn't even the pinnacle of what video games can achieve. This game is built on dated hardware that wasn't that strong in the first place. There are more aesthetically impressive games and larger games that I could be pointing to right now, but this is one that I feel confident showing to the audience here that most people will know what they're looking at and be able to appreciate what it is. Because what it is spectacular. And can you imagine if people looked at this and were like, well, this isn't a video game. You don't even jump on your enemies' heads to kill them. Or there's more than two colors here and you're not beating around a ball. Can't be a video game. There is so much opportunity in front of us, so much that we could be doing, so much that we could be achieving. I would love 40 years from now for us to be able to look back at this moment and reflect on how we were in the Super Mario Brothers era of escape rooms.
None of this is easy. It's not easy to create these games, and it's not easy to create change or embrace change. But the long term viability of this industry is not destiny. If we want long term viability, we have to create that by not standing still, by innovating, and by finding different ways to be relevant within our medium. We've often been asked about the F word in whispered tones by owners, by players, by journalists. We've even asked ourselves, are escape rooms a fad? And the answer is that in some places, yes, escape rooms might be a fad, but they certainly don't have to be a fad everywhere.
But there are parts of the world, there are regions where the local flavor probably is fad. There are places where escape rooms don't meaningfully change. They don't iterate in a profound way. They don't evolve. They do not create a reason for people to return over a long horizon. And we do firmly believe that at some point we will start to see regions of the world where escape rooms just fade away. They're not really a thing that people do there anymore. There may be some companies that exist and persist there, but they're not going to be booming and they're not going to be lots of them because people in these regions where the games aren't great and they aren't getting better, the players will move on. They will find other activities to occupy their time and money. The question that we are regularly asking the escape room owner community is how many times will non enthusiasts play your games? If you're the type of owner who believes that you can sustain yourself exclusively on first time players forever, the question you need to ask yourself is what is your runway if you don't manufacture enthusiasts? Because that is the job of an escape room owner. It's to create loyal players who come back, who love these games, who love your games, who want to play more than once, because you will one day run out of first time players. They are a finite resource. And history is full of forms of entertainment that did not find a way to grow or to iterate with the time. Bowling used to be incredibly pervasive. I went to far too many bowling birthday parties as a kid. The number of bowling alleys that exists now is a fraction of what it used to be. And these companies that do exist are a shadow of what they once were. Same thing with laser tag. Same thing with arcades. But while the arcades have died out, video games have not. They have grown, they have evolved, they have iterated with time. But you know what company more or less did die out? Atari. They were stuck in a particular style, in a particular time, and that time moved on. The only test that matters for a business is the test of time. If you can't last, if your product can't last, you have nothing. Escape rooms have something that can withstand the test of time. We've seen it. We believe in it. We can see this happening in places like Athens, like Spain, like the Netherlands, like Montreal, like Los Angeles, places where the player audience has grown large enough that it has taken on a life of its own. It is growing, it is self perpetuating, it is feeding lots of incredible businesses. The model exists, it is replicatable. And all that it really takes is a couple of companies in a particular region who are elevating one another, who are competing, hopefully in a friendly way, to make better games, to excite a player base.
This is why we created Recon. This is why we gather to have these conversations, to bring a community together, to meet each other, and to learn from one another. And this is why we have the Reality Escape Pod, where we can have these conversations in the off season. When we're not together at Recon, David and PG interview creators about game design and about business, about triumphs and failures to continue the conversation. And this is why we have room escape artists. We have room escape artists so that we can continue to push the industry forward every single day, so that we can have better games, so that we can have a larger community, so that we can have a sustainable, viable industry long into the future, so that we can all evolve. We love this community. We love this industry. There are so many things that we could be doing with our time instead of this, that we could be doing with our money. But we're here and we're doing this day in and day out with the Room Escape Artist team because we all believe in this industry. We believe in this mission and we believe that it has a viability.
We are always pushing for more. We want more companies. We want more players. We want more games. We want people to enter this industry. But at the same time, we want them to be prepared. And a sad truth is that players often underestimate the difficulty of sustaining a modern escape room business. Starting is one thing, sustaining is another. And this is something that we witness, and it's hard for us to watch. It's hard for us to watch a player play a spectacular game and believe that it was easy to do that it was easy to replicate that they could just dive in and do it. I started to do some research into how people overestimate their abilities or underestimate the level of complexity involved in achieving a goal. I found a couple of interesting stats that just blew my mind. Apparently, according to a poll that I saw on Harper's Index, 10% of people think that they can sculpt Michelangelo's David. I have seen this statue in person and it is spectacular. If you have not seen it, you really should. And I'm not like, oh, everyone should be going to art museums. And I'm not fancy like that. I mostly spend my time traveling at escape rooms, but this sculpture is incredible and you can't replicate it. 1 in 10 people think they can, and that's crazy to me. Uh, Maybe it's because the photos don't do it justice, but 1 in 10? Crazier still, 25% of people think that they can paint Van Gogh's self portrait with a straw hat. I've also seen this one in person, which may be undermining my statement that I'm not an art museum goer, but it's true. I've been to like two. There's a depth and a dimension to Van Gogh's paintings. They're just missing from the photo that you're seeing right now. You are not seeing all of the detail. He's also just really freaking talented. And I think that some of this is really what's going on is that people play an escape room and they see kind of two dimensions of it and they don't see all of the things that are going on behind the scenes. They don't recognize all of the complexity that is involved in the day-to-day in just keeping this thing running. But gosh, 25% people think that they can paint this. If you're one of those people, just please get in touch with reality. There is so much to do to create a really great business. And it's not just escape rooms. I mean, we feel this with what we're doing at Room Escape Artist. We are constantly working to get better, and it is hard. And it gets harder the better you try to get. That sustainability part of business, it means that you are doing all of the accounting, all of the finance, all of the marketing, all of the HR, hiring and firing. You are having to deal with building inspectors and fire marshals. You're having to deal with all sorts of contractors. Everything just gets more complicated. And if you are not prepared at the beginning with the right amount of funding to sustain yourself and at least a baseline level of skills and the right team, you are going to have a very hard time going the distance. And there are people who are doing it and they're doing amazing things. I'm not saying that this is impossible. I am just saying make sure that you are truly prepared. At the same time, there are things that we players can do to help our industry. I don't believe that the player base is currently doing enough. And I think that there are some simple ways that we can support the businesses that we love so much. And the first, something that I've been guilty of, I think most of us have been guilty of it, is really adjusting the way that we talk about games. I'm going to pick on Raincorp from Escaparium right now because I just said some really lovely things about their game Forgotten Cathedral. They have 4 games in their Montreal location that we refer to as the Big Four. And of those 4, Raincorp, it's not my favorite. It just doesn't quite do it for me the way that the other ones do. And I found that I was looking down on it a lot more than I should. And when we ran the tour there, I found that I wasn't the only one. I heard a lot of people come out of this game grumbling a little bit. And the thing is that we as players, we are so used to complaining about the games that we hate. It's a natural part of being an escape room player. We all have these stories of going and playing absolutely laughably bad games, and those stories are fun to tell. There are games that are so bad that they kind of cross a threshold into good in your memory because it's fun to bask in the schadenfreude of all of it. But that's not really the case when you're griping about a really good game. If Raincorp was in any other building, it would be the best game in the building. But in Escaparium, it's arguably the 4th best. And that's crazy. I think that we all could be doing a little bit more to ask ourselves if the game that we just came out of was really special and if we should be complaining about it. It's cool to critique, it's cool to nitpick and discuss amongst ourselves about what we would do differently or what we wish the game would have achieved. But like, we don't need to be sitting in the lobby of Escaparium complaining about something that was really spectacular. Now, this brings me back to that point that I made earlier about Yelp and Google reviews and TripAdvisor, and that I wasn't done with it, and that writing these things off was not the end of the story. So let's talk about this. These platforms are useless to us enthusiasts. We have better tools. We have tools like Morty. Thanks for sponsoring this session and this conference, by the way. Morty has a wonderful system that makes it really easy to find great games in basically any city. I use it all the time, legitimately. I open it up when we're going to a city. I look for games that I haven't heard of, but that have a lot of positive reviews there, and we will most certainly go check those out. You have tools like Room Escape Artist. We have well over 1,000 reviews. And we have regional recommendation guides that can pretty much just plan your trip for you. We have Turpica, also a sponsor of this event. The Top Escape Room Project is amazing for finding cities that have a high density of top tier games and seeking out really incredible special games. All of those tools, along with just conversing with other enthusiasts, are far better than Yelp, Google reviews, or TripAdvisor will ever be. However, you have to be an enthusiast to know that these things exist. Yelp, Google, and TripAdvisor are the tools that the normies use. And we, as a community, abandoned these platforms long ago. We have left them to people who don't know what they're looking at. We have not been leaving reviews here. We have not been leaving breadcrumbs for new players to find their way towards something special. And as I was researching for this talk, I just randomly looked up some of my favorite games, some of my favorite companies. And I found that they basically are irrelevant on Yelp and Google reviews and TripAdvisor. these companies that we celebrate. Strangebird is one of the most popular escape room companies among enthusiasts in the world. When I looked at that, 94 reviews on Yelp. Crazy. The Gate Escape in Leominster, Massachusetts is one of my favorite humble escape room companies in the middle of nowhere that everyone should play. I love their game, The Observatory. 30 reviews on Yelp. These companies are special, and there are so many more like them. So, what I started doing, I've only been doing this for a few weeks, is every day I hop onto Yelp and Google reviews and I leave a short review for a company that popped into my head that day that I love. It's not a treatise. I'm not doing a detailed breakdown of anything. This is not a review on Room Escape Artist. This is me speaking from the heart for a couple of sentences, clicking 5 stars, hitting submit, doing the same thing over on a different platform. It's not hard, it's not time consuming, but I know that it is meaningful. And if enough of us start to do this, if enough of us start to pile on reviews for the companies that we love, they will stand out more to all of the people out there in the world. And I am not calling for us to start taking up pitchforks and knocking other companies down a peg. I don't think that we need to give good, not great companies a 3 or a 4 star review. You can if you want to, but that's not what I'm calling for. I am calling for us to elevate the best in our business, to draw more attention to them, to support them in front of the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is on Google reviews, Yelp, and TripAdvisor. Not going to lie, I have left a couple of negative reviews here and there over the course of this little journey. Escape the Mystery Room ruined escape rooms for my parents, and they definitely got a 1 star review a couple weeks ago. I don't feel bad about it. All of this brings us to Recon. Last year, we assembled in person for the first time, finally. And while we were there, my parents, who don't really get escape rooms, they're starting to warm to them, but it's taken a long time. They volunteered and they helped out with so many different things at this event. And many of you met them and knew it, some of you met them and didn't, but they were very much there. And they were watching. And at the end, I was back home sitting in my parents' living room, and my mom said to me, "You know, your community was really smart and really kind." And she's right. This community is incredible. It is special. In addition to being smart and kind, it's generous, it's curious, it's open. And that is what we love so much. It's why we are so excited that we are gathered here virtually right now. It is why we are so excited about all of the things that we can achieve together. And if we all pay a little bit more attention, be just a little bit more kind and a little bit more smart and a little bit more generous with one another, we can continue to elevate one another. And that is the kind of success that we need in the long term.
We want to channel us for good.